I touched multiple girls inappropriately when I was in middle school and early high school. For quick context, in 032M, had pretty difficult childhood, large family, untreated ADHD, bullied and targeted by my own siblings my whole childhood, emotionally neglected and ostracized. Knowing what I know now, I was clearly in severe need of mental health care and therapy, as I clearly had reactive attachment disorder on top of the untreated ADHD. My siblings locked me in the snow for hours, would attack me and harass me, and then I would deal with the same things at an extremely small school. 300 students pre-K-12. Even knowing what I know now, I still lay in bed some nights so angry and ashamed of myself. When I was 15, I had no control of my anger or emotions, and so people avoided me. Then, a group of guys started talking to me one day. They pointed out a girl in our class who was known for dating around. I don't know how they convinced me, but they convinced me to walk over and grab her butt. One of them did it first to show me it was okay, so I did. She laughed it off and told me not to do it again. But the guys laughed and told me she was just saying that, so I did it again later. I don't know if I was looking for their attention or I was just so over s***ized and lonely, but it went on for so long. It happened so many times, and she so clearly wasn't okay with it. Then one day in weight class, the girl I had a crush on let one of the guys touch her breast for God knows what reason. So impulsively I reached up and did the same. But worst of all, there was a group of siblings my parent babysat. One of them was not much younger than me, but in teen years, even a year is considered a long time. One day we were swimming, and I was tossing them around the pool and wrestling, and I realized I was getting excited. I took advantage of the wrestling. It was never under clothes, and it never went past touching, but to me that doesn't make it any less awful that I would do that. I just lay here some nights, and these intrusive thoughts pop up like, remember that time you just did these things to these girls? And I get so angry. I pray that she never realized I did that, and that I didn't scar her because I was such an awful person. But even still, anytime I feel like I'm doing good, and I've overcome my past, these memories haunt me and tear me back down. Edit for clarification's sake and accountability. So for starters, I think the main feedback I'm seeing are the comments about my ADHD, other disorders, and the story of the guys. My intent was not to try and use those as fluff or a crutch. I over-communicate and have had posts on other subreddits taken down for being too long. So I didn't want that to happen, and I obviously didn't explain my own perceptions to things properly. My mental health issues are not my fault, but they are my responsibility. The choices I made to assault these girls was still a choice I made to chase my own lustful desires and satisfaction with no consideration of them. The other guys encouraged me the first time it happened, and with one girl. They did not play any part in it from then on except as witnesses, and played no part in the other two girls I victimized. I think my state of mind was looking to it as a roadmap. Two things can be true at once. First, that my life was difficult, and thus there were many of Maslow's hierarchy of needs that I did not receive. Second, that it does not excuse my behavior or justify it in any way. But in my studies of psychology, I've come across a common thread of seeking the purpose behind the behavior. So I guess my quick typing without context came off as justifying, but that was not my intent nor my feelings on the matter. Second, I want to apologize for not having the foresight to place a trigger warning for anyone else who has been victimized in the past or affected by actions such as this. It does not bring me any comfort to see other posts about how common this is. My hope for this post was not to hear other horror stories about this being a normal male behavior. I have been in therapy a few different times. However, the times I have gone into therapy has felt directionless. Even still, therapists are trained to be unjudgmental, to remain impartial and unmoved. I posted this to get real, true responses. So thank you to those who have offered words of support and understanding. Thank you for showing me that there are people out there who will understand that I strive every day to get as far away from the person I was as I can. That I am not that person anymore and never will be again. This was what I needed, to know that others could see past who I was and understand that I despise who I was. That I could still be seen as a person by real people, and not just a therapist in a chair being paid to convince me I am a person. To those who were critical and correcting, thank you. I learned a while back the value of criticism. Having real people provide insight into these things helps to identify blind spots and mistakes. To those who were raw, I appreciate your feedback. I understand there's nothing I can ever do to make it right. I can take away the things that I did regardless of age or circumstances. I am not seeking any forgiveness or get out of jail free card. I am not trying to manipulate people to coddle me or tell me what I did wasn't a big deal or normal. I recognized my failures. My desire to be a better person is not dependent on anyone's forgiveness of any mistakes I've made, past, present, or future. I want to be better because I recognized how horrible and disgusting the things I did was and how much hurt and trauma I could have, and as others pointed out, likely did cause. If someone is truly remorseful, they will change with or without forgiveness or acceptance, because it's what's right. I can promise you that I will never be that person again, and I will continue doing everything I can to advocate against these behaviors. Story 2. I stole $20 from my stepfather in middle school, and it caused a fight between him and my aunt. For context, my stepdad is not technically my stepdad anymore, but a more specific title would be my brother's dad that has been in my life since I was in diapers. I don't particularly like the guy, but out of all the children he has, he seems to favor the one child that is not biologically his, me. When I was in the 7th grade, my school had an area in the cafeteria where the students could buy a bunch of snacks like ice cream, chips, sodas, and anything else that would entice our young selves to spend money. I have never been big on junk food, so I never cared to ask my mother for money to get anything. Middle schoolers are weird and they think the strangest things will make them cool. So when I saw all of my friends routinely lining up to enter the snack shack, I felt left out and uncool because I didn't have any snacks to eat. This led me to sheepishly ask one of my friends to buy me an ice cream so I didn't feel left out. Fast forward about a week, and I was at my grandma's house, stepdad's mother, for some family event. I was sitting in the passenger seat of my stepdad's truck since I hadn't gotten out yet after arriving, and I noticed he had a $50 bill just laying on the center console. Figuring I could use it for the snack shack, I swiped it and put it in my pocket before slipping out of the truck to go play with my cousins. About 3 hours later, my stepdad began going around to all the kids asking, practically accusing, them if they had stolen his money. They all said no, of course, but it seemed he wasn't going to ask me. I was generally a well-behaved kid that was very clearly afraid of authority figures, not the type you'd think would steal. After he gave up harassing the kids, he went to pick fights with the adults about it. Half of them were drunk, him included. So it inevitably led to a drunken fight between him and his sister, my step-aunt, which resulted in my other aunt driving me and my brothers home to our mom's house. The very next day I put all $50 on my school account and bought all sorts of goodies throughout the week, most of which I ended up giving to my friends anyway because, as I said, I've never been big on junk food. I didn't feel so bad about it back then, but I was terrified of him finding out it was me. It's been years since then, and I feel terrible knowing it's what tipped my stepdad and his sister over the edge. It's turned into a full-blown rivalry. He's insistent that she stole his money, and she's insistent that she absolutely did not. They've been going at each other for years over this one incident. I know my stepdad favors me to the point where if I admit to him now that it was me who took the money, he wouldn't even be mad about it. But every time I go to admit it, I freeze up and can't. I don't know why. I know it's terrible and we're all older now, so I should just tell him to get it off my chest. But there's still that smug satisfaction from middle school me of getting away with stealing his money and spiting him. Like I said, I never really liked him, and even less so when I was younger. Thank you for listening. Story 3. When my father called and informed me about my mother's death, I told him to hang up and call later because I was just about to go to bed. When my father called me in the middle of the night and told me that my mother had passed away, I told him to hang up and call me later because I was about to go to bed. I was already stressed by other things in my life. It was about 4 in the morning when I finally felt I could sleep. I had my television on static and was playing Temple Run when a phone call from my father came in. He wasn't crying, but his voice was dejected and melancholic. He told me that my mother had just passed away in the hospital. My first thought was, why are you telling me this right now? My parents lived on the other side of the country. I knew my mother was ill, but they'd never share details of her illness with me even though I insisted multiple times. I didn't even know she was hospitalized until my father's phone call informed me of her death. When he called, I could feel a growing annoyance inside me. I wasn't sad or grieving, at least not that I was aware of. My response to the news he brought was, I was just about to go to bed, and now I am perturbed. If you say anything else right now, I'm going to stay up all night. Hang up the phone and call me later. Good night. That wasn't a whole move. An awful thing to do. But at that moment, all I felt was annoyance. When I woke up the next day and thought about the news, I felt like my heart was being carved straight out of my chest cavity. I gasped once or twice and shed a few tears but didn't fully cry. I thought about how I responded to my father when he called, and I loathed myself for it. I don't know how I can be such a heartless piece of shit and live with it. All I thought about was myself. I prioritized my sleep over comforting my father and grieving my mother. I'm in a hole. I think there is something wrong with me. I know there is. And I hate myself for it. But I also know that no matter how much I hate myself, I'm going to continue living this shitty life, with my shitty self. I will do more absurdly selfish things like this and pity myself for them. I will hate myself more and somehow continue to live. Edit. Thank you for all the replies. I read all of them up until now. Initially, I posted this confession just to get it off my chest, but your insights have helped me look at this event from different perspectives. I'll provide a few contexts, not to excuse anyone, but to help you understand the complexity of the situation. My mother was diagnosed with cancer about 5 years ago, but neither she nor my father mentioned her illness to me until about 2 years ago. 7 months ago, I learned that the illness they'd been talking about was cancer. Due to the nature of my profession, I can't easily travel or move my residence. In the past 2 years, I've asked multiple times when would be a good time to arrange travel so that I could visit my mother, but they never gave me a clear answer. It was always she's doing fine, no rush, and focus on your career. Before I moved away from my parents, there was a lot of drama between them and within our extended families. Part of the drama was that my mother found out about my father's affairs with multiple women and how he even bought a small apartment and a car for his favorite mistress and her daughter. Their arguments would sometimes get physical, but my father never hit my mother. My mother had scratched my father several times and caused minor injuries. I moved away partially to get away from all the drama. Yes, I am a runner. When conflicts arise, my instinct is to run away and save myself. To address comments concerning my mental health, I'm clinically diagnosed with autism and show characteristics of apathetic personality disorder. The former is on paper, while the latter is always described as tendencies and characteristics and never an official diagnosis. I'm also actively taking medication for clinical depression and terminal insomnia. I was diagnosed with autism, Asperger's then, at 7. But my parents have always told me to tell no one about my autism and to act normal. In our community, and especially by my parents' generation, autism was looked down upon along with many other mental and neurological disorders. They were worried that I wouldn't be able to make friends or find a partner if people knew of my diagnosis. They were looking out after me in the only ways they knew how. I'm sorry about the rambling. To those who wonder what I did after that night, I did call and apologize. My father said that he understood my reaction. I don't, and he forgave me. I asked if I should go back to attend my mother's funeral, and he said that wouldn't be necessary since there wouldn't be one. My mother's last wish was to have her ashes scattered at the sea, and my father followed through with that. I was able to return to my hometown a few months later and help my father organize her belongings. Neither of us has been in her house for years since she and my father were separated, but never divorced. Soon after I moved away, neither of us cried when we saw each other, but that's just how my family always was. We view strong emotions as embarrassing and displays of emotions as shameful. I know logically that that isn't true, but it's difficult to go against something that has been ingrained in your very being since the moment you were born. Edit 2. Thank you again for your insights and criticisms. There still seems to be confusion about our family dynamics. That's not out of the ordinary. We were all more or less estranged from each other before my mother's death. My parents separated because of constant arguments and outbursts. I moved out and pursued a career far away from my hometown. I was still reasonably close with each of my parents individually, but our relationships soured due to all the drama and aggression. When I look at my father, I see a gentle mentor and a manipulative habitual cheater. When I looked at my mother, I saw a protective and hysterical mess of brokenness. Our relationships weren't severed but undoubtedly weakened, though they were never the strong and passionate kind to begin with. After I moved out, my parents and I communicated exclusively through our phones. I texted them a few times each week. We didn't have a group chat, so we always texted each other individually. We called on birthdays and holidays. We never FaceTimed. At first, my mother would mention experiencing back/shoulder pains and headaches. Whenever I showed concern, she would say it was nothing concerning and that OTC painkillers work and told me not to worry about her. After a while, she stopped mentioning her discomforts. I asked my father about it, and he replied that my mother had been receiving physical therapy and that it worked wonders. By that time, my mother was already diagnosed, but they didn't mention it until 3 years later. After 3 years, they started mentioning my mother's illness. My father would say things like, "Your mother isn't as energetic nowadays due to her illness," and my mother would say things like, "I've been forgetful. I need to set alarms for my medication." Whenever I asked, their responses were always ambiguous and vague, such as, "Your mother is ill, but it's nothing serious and I'm almost 50 years old. It's normal for people my age to be a little sick here and there." It was also around this time that they started meeting each other more often. I was happy they seemed to get along better, but now I know that my father was also caring for my mother because she was bedridden. Over the next 2 years, I repeatedly asked for details and updates on my mother's illness. Whenever I asked, my mother would change the subject, and my father always gave frustratingly vague and uninformative responses. I've asked multiple times when would be a good time for me to visit my mother, but the responses were always ambiguous and never straightforward. Around the winter holidays last year, my mother started to text me less and less. By this point, I knew if I asked about it, there would just be another unhelpful response that made me want to throw my phone out of the window. I surprise called my mother one night and very seriously asked her what her condition was, and she very reluctantly told me that she had cancer. She then told me the doctors thought she still had around 3 years to live and told me not to worry. I asked my father again when I should make plans to visit them. I still remember these words clearly. "You shouldn't worry about that right now. Your mother is doing great. If you hurry back, she'll feel sad. I don't want you coming back right now. Wait until the weather is warmer and when you can leave your job for a few days. Don't come back right now." For months, past critical information randomly dropped like boulders. I learned about my mother's surgeries a few years back, though I still don't know exactly what type of surgeries those were. I learned that she was diagnosed almost 5 years ago. I learned that my mother was bedridden for months. And now, I learned that in her last few months, she sometimes howled in pain in her sleep, and whenever she fully regained consciousness, she would profusely apologize to the nurses in embarrassment. Now that I've typed all that out, my thoughts are a bit more organized. The frustration and annoyance I felt when I gave my father that nasty response had been there long before the phone call. Of course, that does not excuse my whole behavior one bit. There are way better ways that I could have handled the whole situation, but I was selfish and dismissive. I will be carrying this guilt for the rest of my life as a reminder of my foolishness. Edit 3. I appreciate all your comments, truly, be they insights, criticisms, or advice. The purpose of this post was never to seek empathy or comfort. As I've stated in Edit 1, my sole intention in writing this confession is to get it off my chest. I know full well that I don't deserve comfort. The post is not under A to C's I am the whole, and it isn't a question. I didn't share my autism diagnosis and mental health conditions to blame my wrongdoings on. Some comments were concerned with my psychology, so I thought I'd clear that confusion. I value my profession, but it is stressful and demanding. I lost a proper sleep schedule long ago and developed terminal insomnia. It has always been an exhausting battle between sleep and racing thoughts. One working method to make me close my eyes for a few hours is to take sleep pills, induce drowsiness. play static noise, overwhelm internal dialogue, and focus on a mind-numbing game, redirect bouncing thoughts. It wasn't Temple Run that's important. Part of the reason I was so frustrated with the lack of information was that my mother's honest health condition was necessary for me to get an approved urgent leave. And my mother is ill, but I don't know how else she may be struggling, but maybe she's not, just wouldn't do. Without knowing the criticality of my mother's health, an excused short leave was the only other way, and the approval process for one is long and tedious. Once it's approved, I'd have to take it, and there wouldn't be another chance for a long time. I didn't expect this to blow up. I see that the community has been appalled by my echolary. So there you have it, guys. If you need more videos like these on deep darkest confessions, then smash that like button and subscribe now and stay tuned for more videos like these.